To sew an invisible zip, I usually do it before anything else, as in I'll put it in my back seam or side seam, wherever it's going, before I make the rest of the garment, because it's easier to sew a zip into a flat seam. So here's one I've actually pre-stitched to the right length, but to give you an idea of what I've done, here's an invisible zip. Obviously this is way too long for my skirt, so this is my centre back waist at the top of my skirt. I want to make my zip about 18 centimetres long. 18 or 20 is quite a good amount. So from the top of your skirt, you want to measure the distance that you want for the opening. So I want 20 centimetres, so I'm going to add a centimetre for my seam allowance. So I'm going to mark a point 21 centimetres down from here. And then what you need to do is sew your back seam up. So you're going to start from the cut edge at the biggest stitch length possible, all the way down to your pin, change it down to a normal stitch length, reverse stitch over it, so normal stitch length being 2.5 or 2.5 mil, and then carry on and finish the rest of your seam. Go and do that, and then we'll move on to the next step. So we've stitched here and we've back stitched at the point where the pin is. Now we need to open the skirt out and press the seam open. Flip one of the seam allowances, it doesn't matter which, and just put a little pin, and put it that way. So that the back stitching section is marked. So first off, we pin the zip into the seam. We're going to do one side at a time and secure the zip into the seam before we sew it properly. So what we want to do is put the zip face down over the open seam. Then you can open the zip, choose a side, it doesn't matter which, and grab the tape and the seam allowance together and then put it back down on your surface. In my case, my lovely ironing board. Then what you need to do is just through the side that you picked up, so this side that's by itself, we've just got a seam allowance and the zip here, you are going to push the zip tape right up to the seam. You'll find that the seam stops the tape from going any further because the seam raises up with the other seam allowance. So you're pushing the teeth right against the seam, and then starting at the pin that you put in to mark the back stitching, pin the zip tape to the seam allowance, and you want to go all the way to the top edge of your seam. Once your pins are in place, you're going to sew the zip tape sort of in the middle of the tape all the way down to the end of your seam. Don't go past the pin that you've put in there to mark the back stitching, and try not to go too close to the teeth. All you need to worry about at this stage is getting the tape secured to the seam allowance. So this is what your stitch line will look like roughly. Now we're going to do the other side. So close the zip and then flip your seam round so that you're working on the other side. We're going to repeat what we did just now, but this time push the zip flat against the seam to make sure that we don't get any pleats. We've already pressed it flat, so the seam underneath is nice and flat. We just want the zip to sit flat on it. Pin all the way along. And then stitch that side down. Remember not to go past the base of the stitching from before, so you don't want to go past your back stitching. So we've got our two stitch lines running through the tape of the zip, stopping at the back stitching. Now what we need to do is unpick the big stitching that we created before all the way down to the back stitching. So once you've unpicked, you'll have a seam that looks a bit like this, and when you pull it apart, it looks like that. Obviously, this is not yet an invisible zip that we're going to be happy with, so we need to secure the last bit of stitching down. Open the zip and poke the zip puller through the hole that's going to be at the bottom of your zip. This is a bit fiddly. poke it through, go to the back of the seam, push the puller right through the hole and then carry on opening the zip. Obviously mine is far too long, yours will be about here. So what we've got now is this, with the zip open all the way. Now it's time to sew it. So heading to the machine, you want to change your machine foot to a zip foot. I'm using the left-hand side zip foot on my industrial, but you might have a specialist invisible zip foot. Choose the side that you're happy to work on. Roll the teeth back because the tape's nice and secured here, so we keep the zip flat, and then the aim is to stitch as close behind the teeth as possible from the open end of the seam all the way down to the join. Keep adjusting the fabric so it's nice and flat and rolling the teeth outwards. All the way into the join and then back stitch. Trim your ends off. And then for the other side, we're going to come from the other direction. So I've done that side. I'm going to turn my seam round and come from the join. So this side's a little trickier. So you might want to change the foot and come from the top again on the other side. But for speed, I just do it this way. Roll the teeth out. Keep the tape nice and flat. Stitch just behind the teeth. And the beauty of an invisible zip is that if you mess it up and you don't go close enough to the teeth, you can always go back over it. Now it's time for the big reveal. So we want to close the zip. So pull the puller so that you're closing the zip all the way past the join. So once you've closed your zip, you can flip it to the right side and have a look. You might need to give it a little bit of a steam, but you should have a zip that sits quite happily along your seam and isn't visible.